Hello everyone. In this video, we'll try to understand what are the KYC or due diligence requirement of a correspondent banking. This video will definitely help people who are appearing for KYC interviews and also help them to explain the due diligence requirements of a correspondent banking. Please understand, and I hope we all know that correspondent banking is not an entity type, but it's a product which one bank offers to other. In this video, we'll cover some important aspects of a correspondent banking, like definition, what all documents are required, and other KYC requirements. In layman terms, correspondent banks are a pivotal part of the financial industry, as they provide a way for a domestic banks to operate when it isn't feasible for them to open up branches in a different location, especially in a foreign country. If you're watching this video or you are on our channel for the first time, please subscribe for more videos on email or KYC concept. And if you have any question or feedback, please share your comments. So let's get started. Before we get into more detail, let's understand the due diligence requirement of a correspondent banking. And also let's understand the basic concept of correspondent banking. What is correspondent banking? Correspondent banking is an essential component of a global payment system, especially for cross-border transaction. Through correspondent banking relationship, bank can access financial services in different jurisdiction and provide cross-border payment services to their customer, supporting international trade and financial inclusion. The term correspondent bank refers to a financial institution that provide services to another bank. So in this current slide, it may be bank XYZ is facilitating bank ABC, right? The correspondent bank act as an intermediary or sometime agent, facilitating wire transfer, conducting business transactions, accepting deposit, and gathering documents on behalf of another bank. Correspondent bank are also likely to be used by domestic banks to service transactions that either originate or completed in foreign countries. Domestic banks generally use correspondent bank to gain access to foreign financial market and to serve international client without having to open branches abroad. So moving on, at times we also need to understand what must I do to meet correspondent banking relationship requirements. Before you enter into correspondent banking relationship, you must obtain information about the foreign financial institution and its activity to fulfill the related verifying and record keeping requirement outlined by the regulator. Obtain approval from senior management to enter into correspondent banking relationship. Ensure that foreign financial institution is not a shell bank. If it is, you cannot enter into the correspondent banking relationship. Set out in writing your obligations and the foreign financial institution's obligation for the correspondent banking relationship. For example, your correspondent banking agreement or arrangement or a product agreements. Now let's understand the due diligence requirement for the correspondent banking. In conducting due diligence on any applicant bank, The following shall be considered: domicile and organization, ownership and executive management, applicant bank type of business and customer base, regulatory status and history, anti-money laundering controls. There can be client visits at times, and also no business arrangement with shell banks. So now let's get into more detail of these components. The first one being a domicile and organization. It is important to understand the jurisdiction where the applicant bank ultimate parent is in or incorporated or headquartered, and where the particular operating unit wishing to maintain the relationship conducts its business, as well as the corporate legal form of the applicant bank. Now, it is also critical to understand the document and detail which need to be kept or documented for correspondent banking relationship, specifically for domicile and organization perspective. One being certificate of incorporation, current banking license, address of the head office, detail of any subsidiaries, details of applicant bank group structure. Now moving on to the second component, which is ownership and executive management. Whether the applicant bank is publicly held or privately owned. If it is publicly held, whether its shares are traded on an exchange in a jurisdiction with an advocaatly recognized regulatory scheme, and the identity of any significant controlling interest, the structure and experience of the applicant executive management of, like it implies, of the most senior executive in charge of its day-to-day business. And depending on the circumstances of the applicant bank, this may include the member of their board of director or supervisory board, executive committee, or its equivalent. The existence of any politically exposed person in the executive management and the ownership structure also need to be identified. And for ownership and executive management, let's see what all information which need to be recorded or kept. Copy of applicant bank latest annual report, name and brief background of key personnel, for example, board of directors, chief executives, chief financial officer, information on the ownership of the applicant bank, including the names of any stock exchanges on which it is listed, information on the corporate governance, including article of association and company bylaws, name of external auditor. Moving on the third component, which is applicant bank type of business and customer base. The types of financial products and services the applicant bank offer to its own client, and depending upon the risk associated with the applicant bank, the geographic markets reach, and also the business purpose behind the application for correspondent banking services, including the product and services which will offer to the applicant bank. So both are very important to understand the business, the customer base, just in order to understand what kind of risk applicant bank brings to the table, and depending on the review, whether a correspondent bank would like to go ahead and offer its services to the applicant bank also depend precisely on this particular component. Now let's see what all documents to be recorded or kept to understand the type of business and customer base. So here we need to have an overview of products and services the applicant bank provide to its customer, and also overview of the applicant bank customer groups. Moving on to the fourth important aspect of a due diligence, regulatory status and history. Here it is also quite important to understand the primary regulatory body responsible for overseeing and supervising the applicant bank. And if the circumstances warrant, an institution undertaking due diligence will also consider publicly available material to ascertain whether the applicant bank has been subject to any criminal or adverse regulatory action in the recent past. For this particular component of regulatory status and history, correspondent bank can look at name of the applicant bank regulator for banking and prudential matters, and also the name of the applicant bank regulator for AML matters. Moving on to the fifth component, which is anti-money laundering control. And it is also very critical from correspondent banking perspective. It may happen that Bank A, which is a correspondent bank, it have a good or a strict controls, AML controls in place, but the Bank B, which may be an applicant bank, may not have enough anti-money laundering controls in place. So then it may bring a risk of money laundering, terrorist financing on the bank which is the correspondent bank. So that's why it is very critical to look at the anti-money laundering controls, which or the nature. So I would say the nature of applicant bank anti-money laundering control and the extent to which they are globally applied is quite relevant before getting into any relationship. So now let's see how can we review or what all may be required to judge the anti-money laundering control of our applicant bank. So one of the important document is a completed copy of the Wolfsburg questionnaire that comes really handy, which specifically talk about a lot of information being captured. It also captured what are the subsidiaries, what are the products being offered by applicant bank, how the AML controls are being applied to or maybe globally and subsidiaries. So all that is quite relevant data from correspondent banking relationships. A copy of AML policy and procedure. If you are operating out of US, then a copy of US Patriot Act certification would be relevant. A name and contact detail of applicant bank compliance officer. So moving on to the last and quite important component, which is client visit, and also to make sure that you are not getting into any business with a shell bank. As a bank due diligence procedure, you may also incorporate or you may also include a visit to the applicant bank at their premises prior to or within a reasonable period of time after establishing a relationship. And the primary purpose of client visit is just to make sure that the bank have a physical address, and a bank is not getting into relationship with any shell bank. And at the same time, you may also get the confirmation. Uh, you need to get the confirmation that applicant bank will not use the institution product and services to engage further with other shell banks. So here the important thing is, one, we need to confirm that we are not engaging with a shell bank, and also making sure that the applicant bank is not further will be engaged or do business with shell bank, which would definitely or may put your bank in a regulatory risk. Then you may also be penalized for having a business with shell banks. So basically, these are the six components which we normally cover when we perform KYC due diligence or on the correspondent banking product. We hope you also like this video. Please share your comments and let us know if you want us to prepare any specific video on any other interesting topic. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.